Ink is a liquid from the gods. Ink is that element that has excited illustrators for thousands of years. So what is ink? Why do we need it? And what do we do with it? Well, to talk about ink, you've come to the right place. I love ink. I'm excited by ink, and I use it every single day of my life. So, let's talk about ink. Well, welcome back. It's great to see you. Today's subject is inking. Now, inking is one of the greatest parts of illustration. It's one of the most exciting parts for me, is this inking. The choice of what kind of tool you use to do your inking, your line work on your illustration. Now, there are 1,000 million videos on YouTube all about it, and everybody has different opinions, so this is mine. So, first of all, I want to try and explain a little bit about some of the elements and the working elements of some of these mysterious tools like the dip pen, the fountain pen. Okay? And to do that, I'm going to try to show you quite clearly what the differences are. Now, I've got to keep checking my cameras today because I've already done this video yesterday and the camera just switched off halfway. So, here are two of the main tools for today. Now, one of my favorite tools is this little beast here. And this is called a dip pen. Dip pen, as in you dip it. Okay? Now, some people call it a tip pen or what, but it's actually a dip, as in to dip into your ink. Bop, 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 draw, bop, 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 draw. And this beautiful creature here is a fountain pen. And it's a fountain pen, and it has a nib rather stylishly made like that. Now, there's thousands of different editions. There's the brush, a normal paintbrush. You can see people doing fantastic line work with just a brush. You've also got the brush pen, which is also another beautiful device, and you have got the felt pen. Okay, you've also got things like the biro. The regular biro that you can also draw with is also a very beautiful. So there's lots and lots and lots of different tools, but the main two I'm going to talk about is the dip pen and the fountain pen. Now, for me, the two main differences between these is this, for me, is like a lightsaber. It's such a basic thing. You turn it on, it's got this beam of power, and you cut somebody in half or you fight to the death. It's a simple thing. And I love the simplicity of it, because the simplicity of it gives me such scope to do whatever I want with it. And some people find it limiting. Some people find it difficult to deal with. And too primitive is another word or phrase that somebody would say about it. Too primitive. I think you're underestimating the power of this beautiful thing. There it is there, look. It's just a piece of wood and just a little metal nib that you push into the top. And that's the basic construction of it. Now, its competitor is the fountain pen. Now, This is not a lightsaber. This is like a complex engine. Because with complex engines, you get complex difficulties. And one of the reasons I don't draw regular with this, I love to draw with it in my sketchbook. I love the ongoing ink. For example, you have this, look at that nib on that. That is just stunning. And underneath that nib has got all these like little gills, like little lines that hold the ink. So it's always ready. Bum, 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 bum. Like a little engine, you know. It's just there, ready to fire ink at you. And behind this big barrel here, this big metal barrel, is the ink. Fabulous. You have all that amount of ink to draw with. And that is going to last you a long time. Whereas all you have on this is that tiny little hole there, that tiny little reservoir of ink. And you got to dip it, and dip it, and dip it. Whereas this, it's like dagga, 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 dagga. I've got all this. I've got all this ready for you. Let's draw. And it's full of this engine and excitement. And the ink will run down through all this body of a system here, down onto the gills, off onto the metal plate that's the nib, onto that moving ink system, out onto your paper. And with that, you have this fantastic tool. Now, it's the complexity of the problems with a fountain pen that kind of put me off. Why I say that is because when I first started to draw with the fountain pen, it's so simple. It's so smooth. Let me get a piece of paper and show you the differences. Now, here is a fountain pen. Now, the fountain pen I put red ink in so we can see the difference between the red and the black. Red and black. So you can see the differences in the way that this works. Now, the fountain pen, it has got this beautiful flow. And you can go on and on and on and on and on and on and on. And it goes on and on forever. And it has this beautiful, very, very consistent line. Look at that. Now, if I was to ink, I would use that. If I was to draw that needed a regular, consistent line, I would be using a fountain pen. Now, the fountain pen has been used by some of the greats of all time. People like Ronald Searle used a fountain pen. And the way that he draws is so beautiful, so consistent. And you can get these lovely little fine lines coming through with your fountain pen. And it's such a beautiful, beautiful constant flow. So, if this beast is too primitive, I recommend the fountain pen. Now, somewhere on the other side is this. This is my reservoir. This is my cartridge of ink, as you've seen, built into that beast. This is just a dip away. And if I wanted to write the same type of thing, now I don't need to splash my ink. I can do it very neat, and I can do it very careful, and I can have the same type of control. Or I can be a little bit wilder and scribble it and splash it and make it pop with excitement. And that is what feeds that wild beast on the end of this tiny piece of wood is what drives this excitement in me. This way that it will flood and flow. That is exciting. And I know that now I need to refill it. I need to top up the beast. I need to feed the beast, because I want to draw a circle and a circle and a circle and a circle and a circle. And I might run out of ink. Let's see how far I will go. There you go. I'm already starting to run out. You see that? I've run out of ink. The fountain pen will go on forever. Well, go on as long as your cartridge is full. But if I dip it and draw, I've got a thick and thin, or a thin and thick. I've got so much control. And that control becomes addictive, because that line then can become a thin line, a thick line, a thin line, a thick line, a thin line. And that starts to make your heart pump, that you can draw any type of exciting line for the person who's watching. You can draw any thick and thin curve. That is what drives me. That is the excitement. But with the fountain pen, you are consistent. You have a perfect line. Look at that, even on a curve. And once you get used to your curves, you can get a very beautiful, smooth curve. Now, the temptation here for me is that if it wasn't the exciting part of that dip pen, I would have to go with the fountain pen, because you can draw a little face if you want, draw a nose, draw little eyes, and you know that all your ink work, all your line work is so even. So if you're doing a job for somebody and they want you to do a very even line, the fountain pen is fantastic for that. Very consistent. Look at all those lines. You know, all my lines here, some are thick, some are thin, some are whatever. You know, some are blobby, some are thick and thin, some are... The fountain pen is constant, constant, constant. So if you're drawing something like a little kind of tree or something, you know, you could draw your little tree, and everything is very consistent. So before you decide which side you're on, let me tell you about some of the negatives of these two beasts. Okay, now, as you've seen on my videos, very often I get a little bit too rough, a little bit too overexcited, and I will break these nibs. But pull it out, get a new one, pop it back in, and you're back on the plate, back on that drawing. If it breaks, pull it out, throw it away, get a new one, pop it in. They're cheap. They're very, very, very cheap little nibs on them. And, you know, if the wood cracks, it does crack over time with all the ink on it. Buy another one. They're only a couple of pounds. Stick a new wood holder on, stick a new nib in, and you're off. So, cheap, but easy to break, easy to damage. And they rust. They come, when you first get the nib, it's got like a little bit of an oily surface to it. And some people believe that you need to put a little bit of heat under it, or wipe it with alcohol to release all that oil off it, and blah, 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 blah. I don't. I dip it in and I say, let's get to work. And bang! Whoa, 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 whoa. You know, that's me. But I'm too eager and I'm too desperate to get this beast working. But that's me. But it still does have a beautiful calm side. It can be the type of very gentle pen that gives you very delicate lines if you wish. It can be very even and very consistent, just like a fountain pen. And you see that? Now it's starting to run out. Now it's starting to get dry, see? There we are, dry. So you've got a few lines there, and you've got to remind yourself. In the same way that you're driving a car, this is your gear shift or whatever you call it. You know, this is like you need to go change one gear, right? I'm running out of juice, second gear, right? I'm running out of juice, third gear. This is your automatic car. This is going to keep going. You just keep driving. You keep steering. This is going to keep you going. So it's a really, really big differences between these. Now, you can get a fountain pen ink that's waterproof. So if you are drawing and painting, then you can do your waterproof ink, wait for it to dry, and then you can put your watercolor paints or whatever you want on top. That's a very, very, very beautiful way to do. It kind of gives you that way of using a fountain pen and adding ink to it. That's a very beautiful thing. With this, I like to use Indian ink. Indian ink just has that shimmer about it. It has that thickness about it. It has that excitement about it. I can't say excitement enough. This tool, an Indian ink, is like the most incredible feeling you can ever have on your fingertips. But this is a good second. Now, the downfall of I mean, I've talked about these break easy, this cracks, these break, you need to replace them, blah, blah, blah. It's only a few pounds, it's very cheap. The fountain pen is your automatic car. It's your engine. It's your complexity. And when these go wrong, these really go wrong. Now, I've got so many of these all over the place. Look at this. Here's one here. Beautiful. Lovely fountain pen. And the ink will not flow through it. Another one. Look at this. Comes in its own leather pouch. And you release this incredible tool. The weight of it, the balance of it is gorgeous. You unfold. Look at that. Look at all those gills on it. Look how stunningly beautiful that nib is. Absolutely gorgeous. And when you put it down, now I've cleaned this. I have done every single thing I can do to bring this thing back to life. And I can't. Now, some of these pens are quite expensive, but you need to care for them. You need to look after them. Where's that? The other one is the. Well, this is a Lamy. This one is a Lamy, and this one has actually been one of the very good pens, because I find that so far this has just been an incredible. Lamy is Chinese make. I did have another Lamy around here somewhere, where I just changed all the ink for it. But the Lamys are very, very good, very constant, very professional, and you can draw with them constantly. Look, still going. See? You can put your name. Not a blemish. It's perfect. So, if you have one of these and you wish to use one of these, keep it clean. Make sure you maintain this Make sure you clean it out. Make sure you change the ink. Make sure you don't leave it sitting for too long. Make sure you keep the gills clean. There is a lot you need to learn about these, and you can learn a lot more of these in detail. Go to these fountain pen people and find out what people are doing to keep and maintain these fountain pens. They are beautiful, and they can go from about $10 up to about $1 billion. But they are beautiful, and they feel beautiful in your hand. They write beautifully. They draw beautifully. But would you like to have a complex engine that is always reliable? Or would you want a lightsaber that's simple and exciting? That's your choice. Now, some of the other tools, before we go too far, is the brush pen. The brush pen is an incredibly beautiful tool. It will give you thin lines. It will give you thick and thin lines. Look at that. Thick, thin, thin, thick. Beautiful. Now, I did have a comic book, and I drew all my comic book with this. I had the little China comic book, and I drew all of the comic book with this brush, and that was so sensational. Where's my comic book? Let me get my comic book. Here we are, a whole big stack of books arrived. Now this was my comic book. Now I don't know if you can see the style of this, but the pen has got a very thick and thin look to it. And I drew this comic. And I drew with this brush. And it gives you a beautiful way to be able to draw characters. And the way that this kind of gives you such a beautiful thick and thin feeling to it is that you can kind of draw all these happy characters. And this pushing and releasing and pushing and releasing, the thick and the thin, the thick and the thin is incredible. And as the more you draw with it, the more you will find your hand is going up and down and pushing this pen, trying to get that feeling of weight. Look at that. And that is a very, very beautiful way to draw, using your thick and your thin. Like that. It's a beautiful tool. It's an absolute fantastic tool. And the obvious other side of that is these very thin, very remarkable, simple, thin paintbrush. And inking, you know, I see a lot of people drawing like Spider-Man and stuff like that. And they have this incredible fluid line. And they can draw I have not really drawn very much with a brush pen, a brush, though I have used a brush pen. Beautiful. And that again, I use the Indian ink, and the Indian ink means that once I've drawn with this, I can go back and I can put some watercolor paints on top of it. And again, these brushes are very simple. but so beautiful. And it gives you this lovely control over thick and thin. So while you're getting to your point of, I don't think that the tips of these will be, I would imagine that you would have to buy quite a few of these little brushes to keep your consistent. I can already see there's a tiny hair sticking out of my brush that's giving me this double line, but I'm sure the control of this is superb. So, which is the tool that appeals to you? Now look across that page and see which one excites you. And everybody has a different kind of approach. Everybody has a different excitement. Everybody has a different want from their line. And you know, if you can go through, it still flows. It's still consistent. And the same way you've drawn your bear up there, you could draw, like with comic strips, stuff like that. I'd imagine these would be beautiful. And the line is so constant, so reliable. And in many ways, the reliability of it and the consistency of the line far superior to a dip pen. And people like Ronald Searle using a fountain pen only backs up the fact of how incredible these pens actually are. Ronald Searle being one of the greats of all time. But then, when I have my lightsaber, I'm sure I'm going to get some laughs about this. The lightsaber, if I feed it, it will deliver. Now I can see that this is bleeding a little bit because the paper is not a very good paper. In fact, probably the only disadvantage I can see with a dip pen is I find that I need to get some very good paper to really see the works, you know, to really see how incredible it is. But at the same time, it gives me this loose excitement. So, the choice is yours, my friend. The choice is yours. Now, I'll explain very quickly about the actual flowing system for the pens, and that is what I've done here. Now, with your fountain pen, this is your reservoir. This big cartridge here that you will put in and you will refill with ink. There's lots of different types of reservoirs for those. You've got some that you can dip into a jar of ink and you can suck the ink in up. You've got some where you can actually put the ink into a cartridge and put it on, which is what this is. And you've got some that is cartridges that you just pop in and the ink is ready. Now, so that is basically what your cartridge is. Your cartridge is this big fountain that's leading down to a tap, which is the nib. And when you push and put pressure onto the nib will release the ink. Okay, so with a dip pen, you can see on that is a tiny hole. Can you see that hole? That is basically your reservoir. So when you're dipping your nib into the jar of ink, you're basically dipping it in so that it goes into that reservoir. So some people will just touch it so that there's a little bit of ink going into that small hole reservoir there, so they draw and they have consistency. I like to have a little bit more ink on my nib, so I'm a little bit more of a heavy dipper. Okay, now the problem with this is that this reservoir will feed it down to the nib, and as you put pressure onto the nib is basically has two pieces to it, as in my fingers. And if you push a little bit, it will open a little bit and release the flow of ink. And if you push more, you will have a lot of ink. So that is your getting used to. How do I push it? Push it a little bit, push it a little bit. I'm going to have a thin line, thin line, thin line, thick line. Okay? Now, with every time that you dip this in, when you're dipping it into your ink, you need to wipe off a little bit of that ink. As I've explained here on the side, from the side of the ink, the reservoir is this part. So the reservoir will fill, and as you draw, you will have a small amount of ink in reservation for when you're drawing. Okay? If you dip it too much, like what I do, you get a lot of ink hanging underneath that whole metal plate of the dip pen. That is where you need to dry it off. Take some off, wiping it on the side of the pen, the pot. So when you dip in it, you need to wipe a little bit off and then do it. Dip, wipe, wipe, wipe. Sometimes you can see when I'm drawing, I like to have that excess of ink. I like to have too much ink. I get excited by having too much ink. So I dip it like a madman in, filling it up, overfilling it, and boom. But that's me. That's my excitement. That's my inky addiction, if you want. But that is the basic workings of your fountain pen and your dip pen. Okay? Your reservoir to your tap. Your tap is the nib. Okay? The more you open that on your nib, as you pressure down, that opens. That's the same as you turning a tap. Turning it a little bit is just opening it a little bit. Turning it a lot is widening that nib and pushing that nib to release the ink. So that is the comparison there. The tip of the ink with the nib opening is going to be your tap, the turning of your tap. And this hole is your reservoir for holding your ink. So that is everything. That is your basics of inking. Now, you can go into a little bit more detail about some of the techniques of, for example, like the cross-hatching of. Cross-hatching is basically lots of thin, straight lines, and you're crossing them. And the best way to get good at these is practice. Get down a piece of paper, an old piece of paper like this, and just practice. Try and draw a apple. There's your apple. And then try to, you can even turn it over, get a little bit of a thinner. And you can try and do your, practice your cross hatchings. And it will give this kind of feeling of shading. Okay? And what that does is it kind of gets you into a practice of light. Okay, so you can use that with your shading. You could even do a little bit of shading on the ground next to it, so you can kind of see where the apple is with the shading, with the cross hatching on the body of the apple or the person or whatever, and you can draw a shadow also darker in the on the base, on the ground. So a lot of these will come with practice. The more you practice with your fountain pen, the more you practice with your lightsaber, the more you will get used to it. The more you will find that, for example, even with a dip pen, you can still do your thin lines, and you can do your cross hatching, because I've taken all the extra ink off. You see when I'm dipping it and I'm wiping it, and then I can draw a nice big thick line around, and I can add more cross hatchings closer to the base, so it'll kind of give me a darker feeling to it, like a gradient almost. And that again is practice. The more you practice with these, the better you will get. So get lots of test paper, just draw and draw with whatever you feel, whether it's a biro, whether it's a brush pen, whether it's a brush, whether it's a fountain pen, whether it's a dip pen. Inking is the way to go. Which tool do you want? So I hope that's a little bit of a step into it. And if you do have questions, if you do have comments, send me some comments, and I will try and go in and explain a little bit more. Maybe I will talk a little bit more about my chosen tool, my lightsaber of life. Maybe I'll go in and make a special video all about it. But for now, thank you very much for watching. Thank you very much for being here. And come back again, and we will do some drawing. Okay? Thank you very much for watching. Thank you very much for all your support. And I'll see you again very, very soon. Bye-bye.